Wonderful. I'm going to repeat that little quick introduction just for folks that are tuning in via Zoom. So I'm Jordan King. I'm one of the research assistants as part of the Crossing Fonds team. And I want to thank everybody for sticking it out to the very end, the last presentation of the day today, the students that'll be presenting, and just also ask for patience in case there's any little glitches with presenting slides as we get started. And first up is going to be Carolyn Smith.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Carolyn Smith. I am a graduate student in the Master of Information program at Dalhousie University. It is currently 8 p.m. my time, so bear with me, and thank you to everyone else who's holding out to the end of the day. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you information on my proposed thesis, which is a study that looks to understand the role of settler-based community archives in the decolonization of archival practice and policies. So today I'm going to be going through introduction to my proposed thesis, a little bit of background and motivation behind my research, the challenges it aims to address, the building of a policy framework, and then just concluding it all together. To start, I just want to recognize that Dalhousie is in Mi'kma'ki, which is on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And we are here today with the Coast Salish peoples and their territory, and I will say that a lot of my research is inspired by my work up on the Sunshine Coast, which the area is now called the Cathet region, a word that was gifted to the area by the Tla'amin Nation. So a big thanks to them for that. All right, so this study aims to understand the existing relationship between settler-based community archives, Indigenous communities, and the implementation of decolonization policies in response to the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, also known as UNDRIP in 2007, and the calls to action of the TRC in 2015. Using a knowledge synthesis approach, I will be surveying, historicizing, and contextualizing policies, protocols, and relevant literature to identify best practice in decolonization. Examples of this literature has been talked about over the last few days, including UNDRIP, OCAD, the Adelaide Declaration, and the calls to action. This study aims to develop a policy, framework, and strategic plan specific to settler-based community archives and archivists to adapt a standardized practice prioritizing respectful and collaborative relationships with Indigenous communities. So a little motivation behind my research, it partly stems from my experience working at a community archive in BC. For almost a decade, that archive has been entrusted to house the cultural heritage of the Indigenous community on those traditional lands. However, it was during this time that I recognized a distinct divide between what I felt was the institution's good intentions and the actual active work of deconstructing their colonial practices and policies. Much like other community archives, it came across numerous challenges that inhibited my ability to liaison and work collaboratively with the Indigenous community, including limited resourcing, staffing hours, a lack of funding, and as a new professional, my own knowledge and understanding. To that, there are some challenges that community archives face. Unlike dominant institutions, such as those that are government funded, a part of post-secondary institutions or religious institutes, rural and small community archives, such as the one that I work for, experience greater challenges in maintaining operations. As noted here on the slide, some of these include limited resources like funding, staff, equipment, space, and training, and a lot of cases, a lack of education and professional training for their staff or volunteers. Some of the areas that are affected by these challenges can include the adapting of inclusive copyright policy, prioritizing Indigenous ownership, respectful digital accessibility, reappraisal processes, inclusive archival description, and the implementation of Indigenous-led initiatives and projects. Although these protocols and standards that we've been talking about throughout the symposium are available publicly online, locating, analyzing, and implementing the appropriate standards and protocols takes time and requires research and a foundational understanding of the current environment around reconciliation that a lot of organizations currently do not have. So as a response to these challenges, having an accessible, relatable, and reliable toolkit that can collectively bring together the vast amount of information, policies, protocols, and standards developed on an international level could potentially help these settler-based community archives become active participants in the steps towards reconciliation and collaboration in the archival community. My current research shows that there's no reviews that have been initiated to understand the breadth of literature and resources available to support community archives in the process of decolonization and in relationship between Indigenous sovereignty and non-traditional archival spaces. So as you know, this is the proposed thesis at this point. So looking at my anticipated results, with the preliminary research indicating the scoping review will identify core concepts that can be used to develop a framework relatable to the community archive environment. I anticipate that the research will further solidify the gap that I have identified in literature regarding non-traditional archival spaces, especially here in Canada. The results are likely to suggest that further academic and professional work is needed in non-dominant archival institutions. To conclude, I think it is most important to say that at the end, the framework is to be used as a starting point for collaboration, acknowledging the diversity among Indigenous peoples' needs and cultures, and will require communicative, collaborative relationships between institutions, archivists, and Indigenous communities for the most appropriate implementation. I would also like to note, understanding my position as a settler archival research, I will be conducting my research in consultation with the ethical commitments outlined in OCAD, UNDRIP, the Adelaide Declaration, and other standards and protocols that are within this study. Thank you.
So next is Mariane Bourcheix-Laporte.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mariane Bourcheix-Laporte, pronounced she, her. I am a PhD candidate at Simon Fraser University School of Communication. And I'm not presenting any of my personal, my student project today, but I'm here to hopefully create some crossover between two projects that are going on simultaneously and that have a lot in common, and so create some conversation there at least. So Archives in Action, AIA for short, aims to create a audio-visual archive policy action plan, and I'll highlight the audio-visual part because this has been discussed in some conversations throughout the symposium to date, but we are really focusing on the audio-visual archive landscape. So project leads are Claudia Sicondolfo and Mary Elizabeth Luca from the University of Toronto, and myself from Simon Fraser University. And this is a project that is supported by a Shirk Connections grant that is ongoing. So the project objectives are to facilitate conversation, dialogue around policy issues, challenges, potential solutions, potential actions that concern audiovisual archives created by or maintained by marginalized communities. And we aim to generate community-centered, care-oriented policy interventions. So just continuing from a lot of the conversations that have already happened, ethics of care, but materializing that in policy materials. and examine the challenges and the issues and the solutions, like I said, and put that into an actual national action plan for vulnerable audiovisual archives in Canada. And we aim to create material that will be that is actionable, that will be used for advocacy, that will be passed on to policymakers, as well as academic materials. So this project builds on 2 previous research projects. Many of you are probably involved in Archive Counter Archive, which has been a 6-year project nearing its completion now, based out of York University, that has aimed to remediate audiovisual materials that are archived in various conditions across various communities in Canada, and that have been created by vulnerable communities. So specifically, myself and my colleagues at University of Toronto have been involved in the policy working group at Archive Counter Archive. And so we're building off of the work that we have done there, that we have seen is needed. Particularly tools like developing principles of respect in research protocols that involve this kind of material. And we are also working from another SSHRC-funded project that was undertaken more recently with the Independent Media Arts Alliance, which is titled Fair Play, Remuneration, Intellectual Property Management, and Accessibility in Independent Media Arts Sector Today. So it's a bit of a sweeping focus, but essentially working with a arts service organization that supports policy development at the sectoral level in independent media arts in Canada. So across all of these aspects, essentially. So we're building from kind of what we couldn't address in all of these different projects. So this is a knowledge mobilization grant. So we are conducting different workshops across the spring, for one in Vancouver, and there's a few people that will be in attendance here. One in Winnipeg, Montreal, Halifax, and then a 2-day symposium in July in Toronto. All of these events are trying to bring together the knowledge, the expertise, the practice, the lived experience of different stakeholder groups, and also bring them into conversation. These stakeholder groups are the artistic communities that create them and that manage archival resources, a lot of Indigenous communities, and the audiovisual materials that their groups and that their archives are trying to do, and a lot of that digitization material of their communities, and academic communities, which tend to be at odds sometimes with the focuses, the needs, the desires of the other stakeholder groups. And we see this particularly in copyright and interpretations of fair dealing. And that's why I asked you earlier a question around this, because these are things that come up in frictions, right? Oh, that's it. I guess I should say that what we are looking at in terms of wanting to develop policy material around. So rights management is a huge issue, and I don't have to tell you that it's a big issue. But questions around use agreements for various uses, for various communities of use, interpretations of best practices in making things usable or accessible. Remuneration structures is a huge component here, particularly in relation to independent artists communities, and so and those structures don't always align with academic structures. Access or lack of access, funding structures and lack thereof, all things we've talked about. Legal implications, in particular legal implications with regard to changes that are ongoing to copyright legislation in Canada, but specifically from the 2012 changes that have broadened the understanding of what fair dealing in academia means. And then the new Broadcasting Act, which has made it so that the majority of audiovisual material that is put online for streamable access is considered broadcast. So what does that mean, right? Not the material done through academic communities, so don't forget, but there are still a lot of questions around that. And then embedding ethics of care in policy. Like we've talked about ethics of care in practice, but can we embed it in policy material actually? So there is opportunities to get involved. We will be producing materials. We will be hosting a symposium in Toronto. So if you're in the area, please get in touch. This is my email. Yes, I hope that we can extend these conversations.
So next is Silvana and Michael. Ready?
Hello, everyone. My name is Silvana Sari, and this is my colleague, Michael Lee, and we are from OCAD University in Toronto. We're here to present to you our work on building data flow in Canadian cultural sector. And this project is a collaboration between OCAD University and SynapC, a nonprofit organization based in Quebec, who helps cultural organization and community in understanding and find solutions in regards to their data practices. We would like to mention our principal investigator, who has been an amazing mentor in this project, Dr. Sarah Diamond. And yeah, the center of our project is, again, building a comprehensive catalog of Canadian cultural data. Next. So why is it, before we start, we would like to do a land acknowledgement. This project is conducted in OCAD University, and we acknowledge the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which OCAD University stands and creates. Okay. Now, why is it important to create a centralized cultural catalog? We realize that organizations, funders, and researchers need access to cultural data, but they are faced with two main challenges, and that is the need of centralized location for cultural data sets and insufficient means to connect with peers working with such data. Now, our catalog provides a range of data sets from publicly available data, so users can easily locate which database hosts the cultural data that they are looking for. We offer comprehensive data sourcings for our users, and this process is very collaborative because we need insights from our users to know which data that they're looking for that we can help to discover. And here's our process of building the catalog. First, we perform an environmental scans of existing cultural data sets and determine the best practices. And it is good to note that we are not hosting any of the data sets that we found. We are a database of databases, basically. And what that means is that we list the metadata of the data sets that we found within these cultural databases and according to their original descriptions. And we're not hosting any of the actual data sets. And while doing so, we also try to map up relationship between these databases to determine patterns and trends. Yeah. And our current catalog is hosted using Excel due to its accessibility and interoperability with other software and platforms. Next, we will plan to migrate the catalog into a SQL database for efficiency in data management and storage. And this is our entity classification. And we would like to credit our principal investigators, Dr. Sarah Diamond and SynapC, who has done the incredible job of designing the entity classification. This classification is created to embrace all manners of data producing entities from private and public organizations. Now, I'm losing the note. One moment. Okay. The classification follows a hierarchy of federal, provincial, territorial, municipal, and regionals, as well as institution, organizational, and corporate levels. University and colleges are placed within the provincial jurisdiction, and it also includes significant data sets produced by individual researchers and institutions such as archives. And in this list as well, the associations divide between public and private organizations.
Right. So the next step in building our catalog is we have established a cultural taxonomy. And for the primary and secondary disciplines, we reference back to Statistics Canada's resources because their taxonomy has a good balance between covering a wide range of cultural disciplines, as well as going deep enough and differentiating specific disciplines. For the tertiary discipline, we ask our potential users to input that. And that is because we want to be inclusive for all the diverse data using or data producing entities. In the future, this user-generated tag has the potential for us to streamline into a taxonomy of its own, but that is a decision that we have to make in the future to see what kind of tags that we're getting. So next, we established a metadata structure. And for this one, we referenced University of Toronto Urban Data Center's data maturity model, which Mark Fox yesterday was here to talk about. So the purpose for this is for our metadata structure to be user-friendly and fully functional and searchable for data owners, for any potential users, and for any maintenance personnel. We have categorized our metadata structure into 6 different categories, and within each category, there are sub sort of categories. And for example, for provenance, we have database owner, we have database host, type of entities, different temporal validity and update frequencies, as well as creation date, just to give an example. When identifying indigenous data, we of course adhere to CARE and OCAD principles, and that involves identifying indigenous data within a data set or a database, verifying the permissions given by the indigenous communities, as well as specifying which indigenous community is involved in this data. And so to populate our database, as well as to essentially stress test our sort of database schema, we created a national database as well as a provincial database focused on Newfoundland and Labrador. Currently, we have 257 in our national database and 329 in our provincial database. This effort is continuing. We are currently building the Quebec database, and eventually we are going to populate every region and territories in Canada.
And again, collaboration is at the center of our project. So we are currently collaborating with University of Toronto Urban Data Center to host part of our databases. Mark Fox has explained a little bit about Urban Data Center yesterday. And so what we do with them is that they will host our databases, and we leverage their expertise in building the interface for our catalog. And also we offer them our knowledge in creating the cultural taxonomy. Yeah. And this is the example of the data sets within the urban data catalog. And we also collaborate with Galleries Ontario. They are now undergoing a co-creation co-design process with various galleries and museums all across Canada. And so this allowed us to have insight on the kind of data needed in the art and cultural sectors, as well as the current practices.
So that's the end. We really appreciate the opportunity here to share our progress and our project with everybody. And we would love any feedback and thoughts. We had a QR code for a Google form, and if you have any thoughts and opinions and feedback that you want to share with us, or do you have any like data sets that you want to share with us to be included in the catalog, or do you want to get in contact with us? You can do so with our Google form. Be very valuable, and we'll find a way for the QR code to get to you. Yes.
Thank you so much to you both. And the next couple that the next few that we have are presenting to us virtually. So we can start with Roxy, because you are set up and ready to go.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to share my slides on Zoom now. I'm Roxy. Hi, I'm Roxy Moon. I am an MI student at the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto, and my research, including this presentation, examines Palestinian digital records and archives on the individual, collective, and institutional levels. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. With the growing recognition of the Palestinian struggle and the ongoing destruction of Palestinian infrastructure, there has been a push to archive or digitize as much as possible, both from those in Palestine and in the diaspora. In researching these growing archival efforts and what I believe to be an archival turn within activist circles, I argue that these individual and collective practices work to confront the erasure and complete eradication of Palestinian history. Regardless of the standard to which this digitization is carried out, with a lot of the time images being blurry or incomplete, these efforts offer a digital or preservation copy of materials in insecure or unsafe positions, which allow for their evidentiary information to remain after their potential destruction. Building off of my previous research, this work shifts the focus to individual actions and motivations behind these digitizing and archiving efforts, rather than looking at the institution of the Palestinian Archive and Digital Archive itself. In this way, I believe that we are better able to see the ways that historical materials are valued within activist and Palestinian movements for resistance and liberation, and how this value is taken up by the surrounding community. My attention was shifted to this more kind of individual and personal act of archiving and digitizing by this video shown by Palestinian journalist Pastia Al-Akkad, which is shown in screenshots on the slide, which is of her going through family photos that she found in the rubble with the caption, "I went on the ground to cover news today, and I saw these memories of a family that no one knows anything about now." Well, these photographs were not shown off in their entirety. She didn't know who they were, where they are, the occasions of the photos, their names, and other contextual information. Al-Akkad did not allow for this family and their memories to be erased or destroyed in the ongoing bombardment, but rather insisted upon their enduring existence through their digital reproduction. People have turned to digitally capturing, archiving, and disseminating records on Palestine as a way of maintaining accountability, fighting censorship, and ensuring that these materials are not lost. Additionally, I found that a growing push to preserve stems from this recognition of how fleeting the historical and cultural record can be, with even born digital materials and digitally circulated materials being susceptible to destruction, albeit in different forms than their physical counterparts. These actions and efforts are reactive, and they operate on a for and by basis, which allows them to best respond to mounting pressures or needs from community members. These practices for individuals can look like digitizing and uploading materials from family photo albums or materials they have found while out. And for collective projects and initiatives, it can be collecting materials from individuals to create databases or compiled kind of preservation collections in order to fill gaps in what materials are being preserved. While not a replacement for the analog item or the original item, digitizing records facing destruction in times of conflict and bombardment is essential in ensuring that these materials persist in at least one form. Further, digitizing materials which might not have been seen by a wider public, such as family photos, constitutes a more robust cultural record and historical record for Palestine. While social media platforms such as Instagram, X, and Tumblr, where a lot of people are uploading these materials, are not sure sites for long-term preservation by any means, due to things like censorship and post removals, initiatives like the Accountability Archive and Accessibility for Liberation are working to collect these materials to be stored digitally. Additionally, recommendations on how Palestinians can adequately organize and preserve their digital materials have been compiled by groups like the Librarians and Archivists with Palestine, which only furthers the dissemination of information on how to care for these and preserve these records. As this research is more focused on the human investment in these practices rather than the larger institution of the digital archive, this research is interested also in the ethics and rationale behind these actions. Issues of vulnerability and exposure that we've talked about today in earlier presentations that are present in making kind of any archival material accessible to a wider audience is only exacerbated by how decentralized these materials are uploaded, being that they're spread across many different social media platforms on many different sites and across many profiles. And alongside this, digital reproductions of materials on social media have also been used for the humiliation and dehumanization of Palestinian people. With these issues in mind, it's really essential that this research pays attention to both digitizing done by Palestinians and non-Palestinians and the rationale behind these actions, as well as how digital reproductions can open these materials up to, and those within them, to appropriation or harm. While I do believe that much of the digitization occurring has the potential and is contributing to a robust cultural and historical record for Palestine, I don't want to create like a wholly positivist conception of these practices, because if you go online, like you are able to see harm actively being done and people acting with poor intentions. It's the nature of the internet, unfortunately. However, I will argue, this research argues that the goal of making visible resonances and traces of Palestinian existence and resistance is accomplished. And while we may not be able to exactly place these records within their larger context right now, we are able to insist that they are there through their digitization and move toward a future where that is a possibility and where these materials were not destroyed. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing this.
Thank you so much. Next is Angie. Are you ready to go?
Oh, thank you so much. It's early morning in India, and I woke up just now, so I don't look really fresh, but a very good afternoon to all of you. Would you mind if I switch off the video? I'm excited to share an early concept for a project that aims to integrate a large collection of audio folkloric data from Phalee village in Manipur, India, into an online platform. Given our time constraints, I focus on the core aspects of the proposed online digital repository. My doctoral work till date has generated approximately 15 GB of valuable audio recordings and notes from the elders of Phalee village. The goal is to create an online micro digital repository to host documents, videos, images, and sounds created by the villages themselves. This will foster community involvement in contributing and curating the data. This work is in the early concept stage, and therefore I will give the very tentative sitemap of the envisioned website. The website will feature two main databases, static database and dynamic database. Static database includes the recorded materials and notes from my research and outline of my doctorate thesis and short essays on the material. Of course, I'm not talking about scholarly essays here. On the dynamic database, subscribers can create accounts, contribute contents, and edit it, though they won't have deletion rights. The site will also have sections for various aspects of village life, such as food, music, clothing, history, festivals, etc. To involve the community, I plan to integrate WhatsApp groups into the website. Several such WhatsApp groups already exist and work as virtual village spaces where residents and the diasporic youth discuss various subjects. By leveraging WhatsApp simplicity and popularity, I engaged the villagers in decision-making and data curation process. For example, WhatsApp tools like polls can be used to get instant opinions from members of the community without making them uncomfortable. This approach ensures the repository aligns with the expectations and needs. To safeguard their rights and privacy, WhatsApp group data will remain accessible only to the community, but the other cultural data will be open to all. So it's believed that the use of WhatsApp for community engagement will work because it mirrors traditional village communication patterns and is symbolic and symbolic of community and a village life. For instance, in the WhatsApp group Phalee Longshim, it has 700 members right now. The word Longshim is the word used for the single gender dormitories in which Phalee children and youth lived till adulthood in the past. Along with this group, the Phalee Literature WhatsApp group, which was created a couple of months ago, now it has 120 members, have become crucial for information sharing to memorialize endangered Phalee rituals and law. It's simple, convenient, and popular within the community, making WhatsApp an ideal platform for exchanging information and gathering opinions. Additionally, the community already has growing awareness about the heritage preservations and environmental conservations. For example, the Rainforest Biodiversity of Phalee is a digital online platform where villagers documented and cataloged the flora and fauna of the village. You might be thinking why there is a random images at the bottom of the slide, but these images are contributed by the villagers themselves to document the flora and fauna on the website Rainforest Biodiversity of Phalee. So far, 224 species of flora and fauna with 3,879 observations have already been documented. So in the same vein, citizens have started sharing information and awareness on the importance of a documentation of the language and cultural heritage through WhatsApp groups. People are aware of the inevitable loss of the language and oral culture if they don't start documenting them immediately. But since we have no funding, skills, and tools, we can't do anything yet, but only to discuss and share information on WhatsApp groups. So in the conclusion, I would like to say that by empowering villages as co-producers, consumers, and preservers of cultural heritage, this project aims to create an authentic online repository of local culture. Villages will not only contribute, but also own and use the data, ensuring their heritage is preserved and shared from their perspectives. I'm currently in the process of defending my doctorate dissertation. Once that's completed, my focus will shift to developing community outreach plans, gathering additional data, and exploring opportunities for collaboration with other scholars, institutions, and organizations with shared interests or who can support my work. My goal is to launch the website as soon as possible. So to create an accessible and user-friendly interface for the online digital repository, I seek recommendations for tools and plugins, etc. The village's digital literacy may be limited, so ease of use is crucial to avoid a steep learning curve. So thank you for your attention. I welcome suggestions to improve the project further. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And so next we have Olivia. Olivia, are you standing by?
Yes, I am. Let me just, hi. Let me just share my screen. Okay, perfect. So, hi everyone, my name is Olivia Daniel. I am a MA student at SFU, but my thesis work is separate from this. I've been an archive coordinator at Kwantlen First Nation for 3 years. I was first hired as a research assistant at the University of the Fraser Valley to cite any photographs held at other heritage institutions on Kwantlen territory, which spans from New Westminster to State Falls. I was also responsible for digitizing sources that were collected during the Kwantlen Place Name Research Project. For each digital primary source, I wrote accessible metadata, which include counting the number of people in the photos, describing the environment, including research notes from previous Kwantlen researchers. During the second phase, I worked along Kwantlen's cultural repatriation liaison, Jessica Hewitt, and Kwantlen's language keeper, Fern Gabriel, to determine which content management software was best suited for future generational access. From the start of the project, we all agreed that this archive was solely meant for the Kwantlen community, meaning restricted access to the archive. Both Fern and Jessica emphasized the importance of honoring the Hunkaminam language and accessibility for all ages. Fern Gabriel insisted that Kwantlen history, including the heartbreaking histories of residential schools, should be accessible, but in a separate place for those that wish to access that information. At first, sequestering information in a digital archive posed as a challenge. Software like Islandora or Omeka had limited user access options. Also, most CMS only allowed one file type to appear on the same content node page, meaning if there was an audio clip of a Hunkaminam word and a video of friends saying that word, those files would have to live on two separate content node pages, causing repetitive database entries. In terms of user experience, most CMS require a level of computer literacy that might not come naturally for those that don't use computers often. Also, the back end of these softwares are complex and at times require Python or Drupal experience, requiring a team of technically savvy individuals, which I could not do on my own. After a thorough environmental scan, Jessica and I determined that Mukuru was the best CMS for Kwantlen's digital heritage. Out of the box, Mukuru has a language dictionary feature, which would facilitate access to Hunkaminam words. Mukuru also allows audio files for metadata descriptions, meaning that if a community member recorded their thoughts about a photograph, that recording could live on the same content node page as the photo. Both of these features preserve oral history practices and Indigenous memories. This CMS also has various levels of user access with their cultural protocols and community functionalities, which means digital heritage items can be restricted, for example, for only direct family members or only accessible during certain seasons. Mukuru also has built-in content warnings which censors digital heritage items until it is clicked upon. All these capabilities and more attracted the attention of Fern, Jessica, and myself. After 3 years of anticipation, we installed our Mukuru software. After consulting the Kwantlen counselor, Tumi Anat, we determined that our first digital collection should be central to the nation's territory. Many of these photos were from the late 19th century and early 20th century from New Westminster, Langley, and State Falls. Whenever I show Kwantlen members the scenic photographs of McMillan Island, they always comment on how high the river used to be and how the land has changed. The next batch of photographs were inspired by the two women I worked alongside, both of whom are talented athletes. Soccer is a source of pride and joy at Kwantlen, and there are a plethora of newspaper clippings and photographs about their tournaments from the 80s. When I went to the Big House Gallery, I brought my laptop to show everyone the archive. People stood around and pointed out family members, sharing memories, and laughing about how young everyone looked. After showing Counselor Les Anton, he showed me pictures of him as a young man with a dozen of trophies from soccer. I've even had a few members come up and ask me to find photographs of their grandparents and even restore damaged photos. One member said that reflecting on old photographs is so important for children so they could recognize elders that they hear people talk about. So far, the community seems to enjoy accessing their heritage online, and hopefully their input will inspire new collections for future generations. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much to all those incredible students and student presentations. Let's take some time for questions.
Thank you. I have a question for my colleagues. I'm really interested to see how your work develops and to use it. So thinking about how is the longevity or because sometimes you go to a database and then the links are broken or the stuff isn't relevant anymore. How do you plan on making your project have a longevity?
I'll give it to you later. Well, currently our approach to it is to make sure. So we have a documentation of our entire process, and then we also have a dictionary of exactly what kind of value and exactly what kind of metadata is needed. And in that dictionary, we also have documentation of what standard is used and the version history of those standards. So currently we use those sort of like essentially just thoroughly documenting every step of the process to make sure that, you know, we don't miss anything, and to make sure that if we do need to do something about the longevity of the database, we are prepared for it. Another thing is like your question reminded me of, like, there is a lot of existing databases with broken links with like no information at all, or like closed database that we don't know what it is. So we don't know if we should include in our database. So yeah.
Thanks. I have a few questions, but given time, I'm going to edit. This is for Silvana and Michael. I was wondering how you're considering or thinking about what happens with like entity reclassification when it comes to when that happens with governments, and how they often revise, I guess, on their own reporting. I mentioned this just as like a heads up for our reporting with Canadian Heritage. We had a reclassification this year, so we had to have a whole bunch of different types of metadata to look at that we received. It's still kind of in flux as we're kind of meeting that deadline.
We will try our best to answer these questions. Yeah, the entity classification, it's currently, we know that this entity classification may not cover any changes in the future. So this is, it's a fluid classification. And as we are listing more and discovering more and more databases, we are also trying to map out and see if there is organization or there's a type of entity that we haven't yet listed on classification. And if that is so, we will put that under review and then add it and carry on. And then it's an iterative process. We're gonna take a look back again of what we have and see if maybe there are classification that better match that.
So we're looking at ways that we can update things like the classification and naming of ministries. We heard that before from people as they constantly rename themselves. So it would be a kind of refresh that would look at it, go out, search, find that entity and its change and be able to refresh. And I think we will have dead databases probably in, we think that's a strength to actually have databases that are relevant, that are no longer active, because it will provide a kind of history of cultural databases in Canada as well. But we're trying to figure out where to place those in relationship to living databases. Sorry to jump in.
No, thanks. So first, I love this one's more of a comment, but I just love to connect with you, Ing, about the work you're doing and connect you with some folks in language and culture documentation kind of internationally. So I'll reach out there. Because I'm really interested to hear, and I've worked with some Sino-Tibetan languages and typology, so it's really interesting to hear your work. This question's for Roxy. I'm wondering if you can talk kind of the ways you're thinking about acquisitions and kind of coming across these materials, and it was mostly just focused on kind of family collections versus what might be institutions. I say this kind of as a Jewish person myself, like knowing the power of the Israeli censure when it comes to like holding materials, as well as theoretically also thinking about like what Turkish records might hold. So where you're kind of putting your focus and interests and dealing with some of those barriers.
Yeah, I think that it's a really difficult thing to navigate, I think, with more decentralized archiving or digitizing practices, with kind of more traditional like institutions of the archive, like the Palestinian Museum in the West Bank and a couple others in the United States and Canada and the diaspora generally. You do have like a more traditional acquisition process where users will, I'm pretty sure a lot of them are post-custodial, so people will send their records to these institutions to be digitized and then have them sent back unless they are sending them to be stored there. But when thinking about social media, it's almost like the post itself is the acquisition practice. With larger kind of like collective initiatives, there's definitely a different process where with the Accountability Archive and Accessibility for Liberation, they're submission based. So it's really kind of who is getting the information on how to submit these materials and who is able to access that. Like you said, like there is kind of almost an inequality in how and where materials are stored and how and where we know materials being stored. But in terms of more like individual actions, a lot of my slides were like taken from social media posts from Palestinians and those in the diaspora. It's really hard to navigate that question. I think that it is almost a reframing of what kind of an acquisition might look like in thinking about an acquisition into the digital space rather than kind of an institution or a collection itself. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think we are right at time at the very end of this incredibly fruitful day. If there's no other final questions, I'm going to say a huge thank you and a huge round of applause for the students.